When the state legislature returns next week, new gun legislation will be in play.
Political reporter Rick Albin talked with two Michigan lawmakers about the prospects of those bills passing.
Republican Senator Eric Nesbitt says that there needs to be discussion. Rick asked the Democrat, John Fitzgerald, if this would be another case of Democrats going at it alone.
Is this going to be another straight party line vote, or do you get bipartisan support on this?
I'm hopeful that we will have bipartisan support on these bills. You're right. Polling demonstrates that 2/3, if not slightly more, of Michiganders are ready for a safer Michigan, are in support of these measures that we're ready to put through in the Senate. As you said, they've been introduced already and soon to be the House. These are in order to create a safer Michigan, and to the naysayers who say, well, these actions would not have prevented the Michigan State tragedy, that may be true in some very functional senses. However, the theme we see here is that people who should not have firearms have too readily access to them. And these bills that we're preparing to introduce and we're preparing to pass with bipartisan support, I hope, will address the need to promote firearm safety, to promote responsible firearm ownership, and to, again, create a safer, more nurturing Michigan for the next generation of children and students.
The three bills are, in their simplest form, explained as red flag laws, full background checks or universal background checks, and gun storage legislation. And I know Republicans have issues, I think, on all of those fronts. What is the prospect for those bills, understanding they may not have yet been fully vetted?
Well, my hope is that the majority, the Democrats, actually take time in the committee hearings to try to work through on what's actually enforceable, instead of us creating a bunch of new laws that you won't have certain prosecutors enforce anyway. I think doing something that doesn't solve the problem is just as bad as doing nothing. And so how do we work through each of these bills to actually provide a little better definition and see what actually happens? There was an article that I read this last week in the Detroit News that talked about how only Michigan law and gun purchases, leaving out the fact, the saying that Michigan law doesn't say that there's background check with all gun purchases. Well, there's federal laws that says there's background checks on all new gun purchases, and they go through the National Instant Background Check System. And so we need to look through this and say, okay, are we just being repetitive from federal law? We're following it. There's one of the bills they introduced would do a registry on every gun in the state of Michigan, which would just add more paperwork without, I think, solving any problems or issues.
That was Rick Albin. Both lawmakers had much more to say on the subject. You can hear those full conversations on this weekend's To the Point.